I Good afternoon. We are talking about the Bermuda Triangle. The Bermuda Triangle. What is the Bermuda Triangle? The Bermuda Triangle is an offshore space within an equilateral triangle and is formed by 1.1 million and a half square kilometers, and is formed by the tips of the Bermuda Islands and Puerto Rico and Miami. For this reason, it's called the Bermuda Triangle. And this triangle has hundreds of records inside, like signs, hundreds of ships, around 100 planes, and thousands of people have disappeared. In this place, signs was registered. In the other hand, like we can see in images, the Bermuda Triangle that is in Miami, the Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. The origin, the First Nations, and the timeline of the First Nations of the region is in the year of 1945. There is a date on which this mystery begins. It is in the year 1945 when a crew of 5 US Navy planes that flew over the area and disappeared, but one more plane that was going to rescue them also disappeared. It was an airplane Martin Marine. In total, like 27 people disappeared without leaving any trace, which were inside of the old planes. The last communication that was had with them was with one of their crew who claimed to be lost and didn't know what direction to take. Then the communication was lost, was totally lost. In the other hand, the fierce rising news, the first news that was in 1950 by the journalist Edward Van Wyken Jones, who wrote in the Miami Herald newspaper about the disappearance of ships off the coast of the Bahamas. And 2 years later, another great name and called George Sand joined in and wrote that the strange marine disappearances exist. But in the year of 1964, however in 1964, a magazine called Asbury Magazine published a complete article about the deadly Bermuda Triangle, in which it contained information about the strange disappearances, like paranormal phenomena and mysteries about people who sailing in these waters disappeared. Finally, this place is a kind of shortcut or fast route to travel to Europe. It is very frequented by ships and airplanes, so there is a greater probability that something probably will happen. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to talk to you about first the impact of the statistics. It's very terrifying to know that 300 ships that disappeared without a trace, 75 planes that simply disappeared out of nowhere, and more than 1,000 victims who never made it home with their families. Well, now I am going to talk to you about the 3 most mysterious disappearances in Bermuda Triangle. Some are from the hundreds of years ago, and others hauntingly recent. Well, we made a timeline to explain. The first one is called the Mary Celeste ship. This case is in 1872. One of the best known disappearance was one of the American merchant ship called Mary Celeste. The ship set sail on November 7th of 1872 with its captain Benjamin S. Briggs, along with his wife and his 2 years old daughter, and a crew of 7 on board. They were heading from New York to Genova, Italy, with a precious shipment of 1,700 barrels of crude alcohol. Less than a month later, his voyage began, and a few days after, the ship last recorded log of November 25. A British ship named De Grazia found the Mary Celeste floating with a sail practically hoisted. Everything and the lifeboat had disappeared. The only thing that seemed out of the ordinary was a sword on the deck. It was discovered a pirate attack since all the crew belongings, a 6 month supply of food, as well as the transported alcohol, were in place. Any another theory, such as an underwater earthquake, an attack of any kind, it was a clear day. The ship was in perfect conditions. So here we have to ask ourselves why people would abandon it and never return. Whatever the reason, neither the crew or the lifeboat were found. The next story is about the curious case of the Ellen Austin. In 1881, the 64-meter long American schooner, the Ellen Austin, was sailing from New York to London when the crew saw an unidentified ship adrift in the Sea of Algae, which is at the far end of the north of Bermuda Triangle. Something seemed to be out of place on the ship, as if no one was on board. So Ellen Austin's Captain Baker decided to observe the abandoned ship for a couple of days to make sure it wasn't a trap. Once that time passed, he ordered the crew to board the abandoned ship. Doing so, they saw that everything was intact. The shipment was well packed, but in fact, there was no one on board. So Captain Baker decided to put his best men in command on the mysterious ship and tow it back to New York. At first, the two ships sailed side by side in a beautiful calm waters, but when a strong storm came out of nowhere, 2 days later, the ship got separated of Ellen Austin. Once the storm ended, a few days later, Captain Baker found the abandoned ship once again adrift aimlessly in the sea. Upon reaching the ship and checking if the captain was surprised by what he found, the ship was in the same perfect conditions as before, but again without a single soul on board. This part of the story has been confirmed. Captain Baker made one more attempt to tow the ship ashore, but after attempt number two entered the same way. The same way, the Ellen Austin just left the apparently cursed ship abandoned. And we have the last case, that is the Jet Grumman Cougar. That is one of the most recent mysteries of Bermuda. It is the disappearance of a jet Grumman Cougar. It was on 90, 1991 at the time of Halloween, piloted by young Virgie and his co-pilot Paul Tucker. The plane was flying over the Gulf of Mexico in direction to Tallahassee. The weather was not ideal, a bit cloudy with scattered storms, so to rise above the turbulent clouds, Birdie asked the flight center for permission to increase the altitude, and it was guaranteed. Then the pilot began to do exactly that. Just when the jet was ascending to the sunlight and outside the cloud layer, it disappeared from the radar. The controllers couldn't believe what they saw. In the place where they had just seen the plane moments before, there was only an empty space. They tried to call the pilots, but there was no response. However, again, there were no distress signals or maydays or anything before the disappearance. The plane was falling into the ocean. In fact, it was all in the contrary. It was gaining height. It seems to vanish when it not sent to the necessary height. To date, no trace of the jet has been found. So this is just three of a lot of cases that we search from this Bermuda Triangle. There is more histories remonted from Cristobal Colón. We hope that you enjoy our presentation. Here you can see our references of information and image references. Thank you very much and see you later.